well, this is a topic that is present in every single country all over the world, and that spotlight should be on forever.
Hey everyone, my name is Sarah. Welcome to Friendly Faces, Amazing Places, a podcast where each week I share stories from real people I've met while traveling. Everything from horror stories to inspiring adventures to insightful tips and advice. So sit back, fasten your seatbelt, and come explore the world with me and my friends. Oh my goodness, I just realized this episode's going to come out on Juneteenth. That's really, really exciting. Yeah, so hey everybody, this episode's going to be a little bit different than usual. It's still going to be great as usual. I don't know I have a bunch of information I want to share, but I don't know how to start. I guess I will just start by saying I'm very grateful to have been outside the US for as long as I was, not only because we're in such a shitty presidency right now, but because I gained a lot of experience and knowledge that I've brought back to my American citizenship, and which has made me think about our country in different ways. Personally, in the last year, I've spent a lot of time not paying attention to news, not paying attention to American politics. Part of that has been due to my personal life and my mental health, and also part of it was not being in the US for many months. But since I've been back, I've found it really necessary to reintegrate myself into what's going on. And as I'm sure every one of you knows, there's a lot going on right now. There are obviously a lot of places on the internet and TV and film and wherever you get information where you can hear really important Black stories right now. And I want this episode to be a way to see another perspective, which is kind of a worldly, international perspective. So what I did for this episode is I reached out to a bunch of my friends from around the world, and I asked them to respond to a set of questions about the Black Lives Matter movement. It's really easy in the United States to get caught up in American news outlets. News is very sensationalized now, and it's all around us. It's in social media, it's in everything. So I really want to know how other countries are reporting what's going on in the US right now and what is going on in other countries in reaction to the Black Lives Matter movement that has picked up some speed lately. Something that's really interesting about travel for me is that I come from such a racially divided country, a country that's so rooted in a history of racism that when you travel to certain places, it's a different dynamic. There are a lot of places in the world that have a similar dynamic of a history of African enslavement, but either that dynamic is different or there are actually places in the world that don't have that history. And so it's very interesting to see what kind of racism or prejudice does exist in a way that you didn't grow up with. So yeah, these are some of the things that I asked my friends to talk about, and I got a few responses, which I'm going to share with you in a little bit. First, I want to talk about a few things related to race and travel. Before we get into my guests' responses, I wanted to start by talking a little bit about the history of the police in the United States, because I found a really interesting article about it that I wanted to share. And I'm not going to go into a really in-depth history because that's a whole other podcast, but I did want to point out that the police have not always existed. And it's hard to think about that. If you think back long enough, it was just the wealthy people who could hire bodyguards and soldiers and things like that. We didn't actually have a police force that guarded or policed everyday people. Before we had an actual police force, we had something called the Night Watch, which is pretty hilarious because they were just volunteers who would watch over the city at night, making sure that prostitution or public drunkenness wasn't happening. And the ironic thing is that the Night Watch was actually used as a punishment for people who misbehaved in the community. So if you did get publicly drunk one night, your punishment might be to go on the Night Watch the next night and watch your friends get drunk. I think that's pretty interesting. So then eventually we did develop a police force, and this was based on two main capitalistic motives. So in the United States, for anyone who doesn't know, we used to have, and we still do have, but historically we had a huge economic divide between the north and the south of the eastern seaboard. The north was very industrialized, and the south depended a lot on agriculture. And the thing that made Southerners super wealthy, Southern landowners, was their dependence on a free labor source, which, yes, we know what that is. It's the enslavement of African peoples. But the North also had quite a bit of wealth, especially around the Gilded Age. Things were industrializing. There were these men who owned businesses that just blew up, and they made insane amounts of money. The first organized police force was created in Boston in 1838. Boston was a large shipping and commercial center, and businesses had been hiring people to protect their property and safeguard the transport of goods from the port of Boston to other places. So these wealthy merchants ended up transferring the cost of the police force to citizens because they claimed it was for the collective good, when really the police force was just to protect their wealth. The same thing happened in the South, except in this case, the property and goods that police were hired to safeguard were people. And also a lot of the police force that was created was centered on keeping slaves enslaved, catching runaways, depriving Black people of their rights. And after this, the police developed into what they are today with 150, can't do freaking math, with over a century of a history of brutality against Black people. And here we are. So I just wanted to share that little bit of history. I thought it was pretty interesting. Everyone thinks the police is created to protect everyone. They were actually created to protect wealthy people. The other thing I wanted to bring up in terms of the police is how their budgets compare to the military budgets of other countries. I saw something about this on Instagram, and it was crazy, so I looked it up. So according to Forbes magazine, New York City spends $5.61 billion annually on the police. That is $1 billion more than North Korea spends on its entire military. And I just want that to sink in for a second. The next city in the US that spends the most on police is Los Angeles with $1.73 billion, then Chicago, $1.68 billion. Anyways, I think there are a lot of statistics you could come up with that show that other countries do not prioritize policing as much as we do, and probably prioritize things like education and healthcare better than we do. But again, that's a whole nother episode. Alright, so enough about the numbers, the history. I want to talk about race in terms of travel. We need more diversity in the travel industry, that's for sure. I think I don't see a lot of the kind of positions that I see Black people working in the United States in the travel industry are in service positions in airports, or maybe in housekeeping. But I couldn't tell you off the top of my head a time when I've seen a Black pilot or a hotel manager, a tour guide. I don't know if I've ever had a Black tour guide anywhere I've been. I also read an article about the travel industry that said that $63 billion that went into the travel industry came from Black American travelers in 2018. I think one way that you can bring more diversity to your own travels is to follow Black travel influencers. Their way of seeing the world is going to be so much different than that of a white travel influencer. It will also normalize the visual of Black travel. One account that I've been following pretty closely lately is that of Gloria Tanmo. She is a travel blogger and content creator. I'm going to drop her handle in the episode description. But I've been following her posts, and she's been posting a lot of stuff about her experience as a Black woman traveling, how she's been treated in different countries, including being perceived as a sex worker, or not being treated with respect until people know she's American, and even then not being treated with respect. She has these posts that she does where she poses a question and then she poses a bunch of answers to it. For example, what are the most racist countries? What are some Black-friendly countries? Anyways, I'm really enjoying her content. You should go check her out. I'm also going to recommend 2 episodes from the Women Who Travel podcast. I recommend that podcast just anyways, but 2 episodes that really stand out to me speaking about the Black travel experience are the latest episode, which is called How the Travel Industry Should Support Black Women, and the episode where they interviewed Jessica Nambango, who was the first Black woman to visit every country in the world. And then the last couple things I want to talk about are some travel mindset ideas. I think it's so easy for a lot of people, especially Americans, to see travel as just a vacation, just a way to go relax. And when you travel to foreign countries, you can't do that. Especially if you're privileged enough to get to travel to a beautiful paradise or to an amazing retreat or really anywhere in the world, you need to acknowledge the history and the circumstances of why you were able to be so transient in the world. I would say, number 1, don't ignore race dynamics in the country you go to. See how Black people or other ethnic minorities are treated in the places you go and compare it to your home country. Read and learn about the history of race and colonialism of that country before you go. Travel is not just about being relaxed and in paradise, and I want to point out that in fact some of the most paradise-like places thrive on Black labor. They thrive on a history of colonialism that murdered indigenous peoples and then enslaved African peoples and brought them to be the labor force. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't vacation in these places. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying think about where you're putting your money and when you're there, what you're paying attention to. The other thing I'd like to put out there is to question your assumptions about countries based on their racial makeup. We have a lot of stereotypes in our heads that would perhaps hinder you or give you a very narrow experience when you travel to a certain country. I've talked on this podcast a few times before about countries being seen as dangerous. A lot of times Blackness is correlated with danger. So question who is telling you that a place is dangerous and what people from that country actually think about that country. So those are my thoughts about diversity in the travel industry, how we can be better travelers and pay attention to racism in various countries. So now I'm very excited for you to hear the responses that I received from my friends in different countries around the world. Let me see, who do we have represented? We have Australia, we have Argentina, we have Brazil, we have Belgium, and we have the Netherlands. I know these are very random countries, but I really appreciate all of you who sent me your responses, so thank you so much. I wanted to add a quick note that the last one, Paula, is in Spanish. If you need the English translation, the video of this episode has the English translation on screen. You can find the link to that video in the description. Also, Paula mentions 3 people in her response, and I've compiled a list of articles that have more information about them in the description. So now let's hear some international perspectives on the Black Lives Matter movement.
Have you heard about the Black Lives Matter movement/riots in the USA in your country's news? And the big fat answer to that one is yes, a resounding yes. It has been everywhere across the news here in Australia ever since George Floyd's very tragic death last week. The media has just been, swamped. I mean, coronavirus, what's that? It's like we've completely forgotten everything else is going on in the world right now because this is really taking over. And even though obviously there are still very important and relevant other issues happening in the world right now, I, for one, am really glad that this is being put front and center. I think our media has actually done quite a good job of reporting everything. We've, of course, heard and seen the absolutely horrible and distressing videos of George Floyd's murder, and then everything that's happened from there. So we're hearing about other people who have died or been killed, but right across the world, of course, in the US, but it's even become quite a broad issue now in Australia as well. Of course, we've heard all about the protests taking place. We've heard about the process of the police officers who committed that murder being charged. We've heard about all the, riots gone wrong, all the looting, and people acting out as part of the protests, which has been, quite a confronting thing for me to see. So I'm sure for people from the USA, it's been really hard as well. We have also seen the way that trickles down through society. So starting to hear a lot of really personal stories from people of color right across the world, their experiences with racism and how it is still very prevalent today, despite a lot of people perhaps thinking otherwise. And that's why I think this is ultimately the fact that it's being it's become such a large issue in the media is actually, I'm hoping it's going to be a positive thing in the long run, because the events that we've seen last week and all the tragedies and atrocities that have been committed against people of colour for forever, we need to do better. We need to make the world a better place. It's not right in any sense of the word, and I hope this whole debate does spark change. It has to. I really think it has to. And I think the way people have reacted in the US is pretty demonstrative of that. I should also mention it's been very, interesting and very heartbreaking, and also very upsetting to see not everyone in the government in the USA's reactions, but obviously I'm referring specifically to Donald Trump, the president. I think on a personal level, his response has been absolutely terrible. It's been the complete opposite of what anyone wants and needs. Yeah, I for one hope people really take that on board when forming their opinions about him. For example, there was a huge news story this week about how he cleared a path through all the protesters so he could go and take some photo in front of a church. And it was almost like an eye roll, like how your country is going through, they're calling it 2 pandemics right now, and that's your priority. It does beg a few questions. I have no idea what he's thinking. So it's been pretty comprehensive and a pretty sobering, sad week, to be honest. Have you seen posts or videos or other things on social media about Black Lives Matter? Yes, definitely have. As well as being, right across the media, radio, TV, and other news outlets, social media has gone off, one could say, with this whole thing. Every time I scroll through Instagram now, the entire feed relates to this movement, Black Lives Matter, or, people sharing their stories or sharing more news. Or one thing I have found more heartwarming is that people are now sharing a lot of resources and information and ways to help. And it's been really great to see those resources being shared. I know I've learned a lot. I've seen different ways I can actually volunteer, because personally I really like to volunteer my time. So there's different organizations here I can volunteer with, lots of different books and podcasts and movies and just general resources to improve people's education around history and racism in general, and all of that will go back into those communities and hopefully help. The biggest thing I've seen on social media is the Blackout Tuesday movement, which was where everyone posted a black square and just hashtagging Blackout Tuesday. And I know there was some controversy about that. Most people, I really believe, were doing it out of their goodness of their hearts or with the right intentions, which was solidarity. I did post one, and that was my intent, was to show that I wanted to shut up and listen. to people's voices who really matter right now. And I know some people said, that doesn't actually mean you're going to take action or make change. And look, that's a fair point. But I think it's something. I think if people actually took the time to learn what the movement was about and posted that black square, I think that does symbolize something. And for me, it was really powerful that day, scrolling through Instagram, and literally my whole feed for as far as I could scroll was just black squares. And, that's got to stand for something, right? Does your country have a similar movement? Yes. Yes, we have for a long time, but now, sparked by the issues happening in the USA right now, it has become massive. So since George Floyd's murder, we have had a lot of protests occurring in Australia as well, right around the country. Certainly not to the extent that has happened in the US. So we, I guess very thankfully, haven't had looting and people kind of maybe going out of control. I really personally believe in peaceful protesting, and that's what we've seen by and large here in Australia. So people gathering, people marching, people telling their stories, and that's been right across the media. I think our protests are, keeping in mind the global situation of racism and people of colour, but in particular here in Australia, we are focusing as well on our Indigenous Australians, which I, for one, think there is a lot of work to do in that space. I definitely do think it's improved over time, of course, but we still have so many problems here, and I am constantly saddened by the lack of respect and understanding for Indigenous Australia and the whole eons old culture. It's a beautiful culture that goes with that. And even though I think a lot of people in Australia do, they do understand on a certain level, but I think we have room to go a lot deeper, and really bring the pride and respect for our Indigenous culture to the forefront of what it means to be Australian. So we still have similar issues to the US, everything suicide, education, health, incarcerations, domestic violence, all of that, through the roof. The statistics are a lot higher for people who are Indigenous Australians than other Australians. So that in itself is very clear evidence that we have room to improve. I, for one, will be attending a protest in a couple of weeks here in my hometown of Perth. And it's going to be a peaceful protest, people gathering, people, joining in solidarity and asking for change, demonstrating that that's what we want. So I, would encourage anyone else out there who's maybe unsure about going to one of these protests or doesn't really know how, just chuck a Google search out there, check on Facebook for events. There's stuff happening all over the world, and I think it's really important we all show up, especially as a white Australian. We've got to stand together. So I'll be proud to go to that. How do you feel about racism in your country? In Australia, the research that I've done, and I'm by no means an expert, this is just through my own observations over time, but I really think racism here has kind of developed and evolved, and it almost seems like it's a bit of a flavor of the month. For a while, people from Asian backgrounds were faced with a lot of racism, and then it was people from Muslim backgrounds, and certainly right now we're really trying to dig deeper into the racism that occurs around our Indigenous Australians. But I think, yes, Australia is still a racist country. It is still there, and it's something we really should do better on, because I've always been really proud of being an Australian, because I love the fact that our country is made up of people from all over the world. Everyone here, just about everyone actually, does have a story or, relatives from a place that is not Australia. And it makes our culture and country so much more rich and beautiful and diverse. And it brings so much to who we are as a people. So we should own that. I want to own that, and I want everyone to own that. It should never be us and them. It should be all of us, just us. Do you believe that racism or social justice in one country can affect another country? 100%, clearly demonstrated by what's happening right now. It's actually incredible to see how that has moved as rapidly as it has right around the world. There's people protesting everywhere. This Black Lives Matter movement is now everywhere. And I think that has a lot to do with the day and age we live in as well. Partly, I think we have progressed over time as a people. There has been improvement in these areas, and people are therefore more aware and mindful of the issues and what needs to be done. Also because we've progressed technologically. And so obviously being able to share these things around the world in like 30 seconds flat through the internet and social media has been amazing. When we can share ideas, we can share stories, we can share resources, we can keep other nations informed, we can stay in touch with what's going on in the real world. This certainly isn't the first instance of a person of colour being murdered by a white person. But I did hear or read somewhere in one of our news broadcasts, racism isn't getting worse. The difference is now it's getting filmed. I try to come from a place where I remind myself every day to look at the world with love. And that can mean whatever you want it to mean, but it basically is self-explanatory. So it's whenever something happens in the world or something happens to you, try and come from a place of love when you're thinking about that and deciding how to react to it. Everyone has a story, and everyone is deserving of having their story heard and being loved and respected for who they are.
Hi, my name is Mira and I'm from the Netherlands. I've heard about the Black Lives Matter movement in the news in the Netherlands. I've heard that last Monday, an innocent black man, George Floyd, had been killed by a white police officer and multiple officers in Minneapolis. And due to this event, there are protests going on in different cities in the USA. And yeah, it's actually about a trend that has been going on for decades now. Black people being killed by the police for no particular reason. And well, it's not only about that, it's about racism that is deeply rooted in the whole system. And yeah, I think, it has to change now. I have seen a lot of different posts on Instagram that's the media platform I mostly use. For example, that funds are being raised for protesters who can't pay their bail, and other websites to donate money, petitions to sign, literature to read about the history of racism, and other tips about what you can do to stand with the Black people. Yeah, today on Tuesday was an international Blackout Tuesday, out of respect and solidarity. A lot of people were posting a black square on social media and also sharing stories of Black people and appreciation posts of Black artists and Black culture, and a little bit more education. The Netherlands do have some similar movements, but before all this, they were actually not that well known, I think. One of the movements that are active now is one I heard of before. It's called Kick Out Zwarte Piet, and you also have some others. How do I feel about racism in the Netherlands? Well, even though I always felt like I didn't try to contribute to it, I now realize that being silent, what I've actually always been, is also a way of contributing to racism. And well, there's one really big example of racism in the Netherlands. We have a national feast called Sinterklaas, which is kind of similar to Christmas. And we have an old man his name is Sinterklaas, who gives presents to children. And he has helpers who are called Zwarte Piet, and that's literally translated Black Pete. And in this feast, in this tradition, white people paint their faces black and play Black Pete. Well, I grew up with this tradition, and as a kid, I never even thought of this feast being racist. But since 2011, there is a debate going on about this tradition being seen as racist by people. And at first, I couldn't understand why people would think of this tradition being racist. I thought like, oh, it's a feast for children who are getting presents from Sinterklaas and Zwarte Piet. And well, Black Pete is black because he went down to the chimney to we give presents. But after a few years, my opinion about this changed. Yeah, a lot. Because why would we maintain a tradition in this way when there are people being hurt and feeling offended by it? And I also realized that when I try to explain this tradition to people from other countries, yeah, it's almost impossible to not find it racist. Like, why would you paint your face black? Well, and every year around December, this still is a hot topic. And well, fortunately, the tradition is shifting, and there are no completely black peats anymore. Only, yeah, with a little bit of the coal from the chimney. And the name of Black Pete is no longer Black Pete, but he's called Pete now. But still, yeah, it's a difficult topic, and a lot of people are still angry, like, oh, why is he changing? And it's not racist at all. But the fact that people, or mainly white people, who say, oh, it's not racist, then that's the point. It is racist. And yeah, it's a really difficult situation. Do you believe that racism or social injustice in one country can affect another country? I do, and that's exactly what you see happening right now all over the world. First, it was starting with the protests in the USA, but now a lot of other countries, such as Germany, Japan, the UK, Belgium, also in the Netherlands, yesterday were protests in Amsterdam, and today also in two other Dutch cities. Well, this is a topic that is present in every single country all over the world. And I really think it's good that there is a spotlight on it right now, and that spotlight should be on forever. Yeah, so that change will happen.
But of course, we heard about Black Lives Matter. Of course, we are all very angry here. I mean, everyone is angry, and all these things shouldn't happen, and we're mad. Oh yeah, I'm so mad. I wanted revenge. I wanted, I wanted the world to burn when I saw this shocking video. Really, it was the most shocking video that I've seen those last month, and unfortunately nothing's gonna really change because this is happening, and every time, like, history repeats itself, unfortunately. And it's not only towards blacks, it's racism. Like, sometimes I feel that it became something normal, something that you have to live with it. And there's more hatred, I think. All these movements, of course, I'm glad there are some movements, but is it really changing mentality of people? I don't think so, because ignorance is just increasing, I think. And yeah, I don't know what to say, but that video, those 9 minutes were really hard to watch, to be honest.
Hi everybody, my name is Ana. I'm from Argentina. Yes, I heard about the Black Lives Matter movement in the USA. Not in the news, but I read it on Instagram and also Twitter from friends around the world. I saw videos different posts, lots of information. My country doesn't have a similar movement. Here in Argentina, there's a lot of racism. It's so hard because most of the people here are not white. There's a lot of racism, but when that kind of things happen in other country, everyone here just suddenly are empathy with these battles, these fights against the injustice. But it's so annoying for me that here in my country there's a lot of problems and nobody matters. But then everyone is with this movement. I believe that riots in other countries affect my country. It's so annoying for me that when it's a different country and it's different people, they matter, but when it happens near your house, nobody cares. So that's all. Gracias.
Hola, me llamo Paula Basilio, tengo 28 años, soy pedagoga y licenciada en Derecho. Quería decir al principio que sí, sé que el movimiento Black Lives Matter y este movimiento se hizo famoso en 2014, después de la muerte de Eric Garner, quien también murió a causa de la violencia policial, diciendo I can breathe, no puedo respirar. Los días de protestas en los Estados Unidos llegan a casi una semana con los lemas Black Lives Matter. El primer video que se volvió viral aquí en Brasil fue de el George Floyd, hombre negro, siendo asesinado por un policía blanco mientras sostenía su cuello con su rodilla. Floyd también repitió la frase no puedo respirar varias veces. Pido disculpas si la palabra el asesinato suena muy fuerte, pero esta es la realidad. La muerte de los negros solo aumenta anualmente y esto es culpa de la policía que utiliza tácticas de enfoque agresivo contra los negros y en territorios negros. Y esto, a diferencia de Estados Unidos, también sucede aquí en Brasil. Pero antes de hablar de eso, solo quería enfatizar que todas las protestas que ocurren a diario en los Estados Unidos se están reproduciendo aquí, ya sea a través de redes sociales como Instagram, Twitter o incluso en periódicos que salen en la televisión abierta. Aquí en Brasil vivimos un racismo estructural que ha estado sucediendo desde el momento en que vivimos en un imperio. Contrariamente a la creencia popular, la violencia contra los negros en Brasil es tan absurda y común como el de Estados Unidos. Y esto se debe a que, al igual que allí, la policía brasileña fue creada para proteger a las familias blancas, para sacar a las personas negras de la calle porque representaba una amenaza. La violencia contra los negros en Brasil es absurda. Entre las innumerables muertes puedo mencionar la de la concejal Marielle Franco, quien fue asesinada con 3 disparos en la cabeza en 2018 y hasta ahora no ha encontrado ninguno responsable. Otro caso es de Evaldo dos Santos, un hombre negro, padre de familia, quien fue asesinado por soldados del ejército brasileño, quien disparó 80 veces y luego dijo que fue un error. Y nuestro caso más reciente es de João Pedro, un niño negro de 14 años que hace 2 semanas fue asesinado por la policía dentro de su casa. La policía afirma que entraron en busca de traficantes de drogas. João Pedro todavía fue muerto a tiros por la espalda y se encontraron 70 disparos en su casa. El racismo en Brasil En realidad es estructural. El prejuicio existe y mientras las personas tengan prejuicios contra asumir que tienen prejuicios contra las personas negras, poco se puede hacer. Necesitamos hablar de eso. Quizá más importante y urgente, necesitamos una reforma en la policía militar brasileña. Brasil es un gran país de territorio y ha estado creciendo en los medios internacionales, a veces por cosas no tan buenas como la existencia del actual presidente. Pero independientemente creo que sí, que el racismo y la injusticia social puede afectar a otros países. Lo que espero es que afecte de manera positiva, porque estaba viendo las protestas contra el racismo y violencia policial en los Estados Unidos que los brasileños crearon el coraje para salir y luchar contra el fascismo que se crece en nuestro país.
Hey everyone, it's Sarah again. I hope you enjoyed listening to those perspectives. I learned a lot from it. I've had a lot of really great conversations about race with Zach. I've talked with Mira about Black Pete before. When I was in Brazil, I got to learn a lot about the racial structure of their society, so thank you to Paula. Muchísimas gracias por eso, Paula. So thanks again, everyone, for sending those in. So this is the end of the episode. I hope I've left you with some thoughts about diversity in travel, about Black Lives Matter. Please keep taking action in whatever way you can. And I'll just end this episode by saying Black is beautiful, Black Lives Matter, and Black travel stories matter. Bye, y'all. Thanks for listening to this episode of Friendly Faces, Amazing Places. If you'd like to see pictures from my guests' travels, go ahead and check out our Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube channels. And if you want to stay up to date on future upcoming episodes, please follow and subscribe.